morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pod you're on, and welcome to an extra special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm joined by Accrington Stanley historian Darren Woodhead here today. We have a man who was once the CEO of Accrington Stanley, in addition to working behind the scenes with Macclesfield and Blackpool. We're very, very excited to have Rob Hayes on the show with us today, and it's a bit of an interesting day in terms of news. So Rob, we're an Accrington show, and we definitely wanted to talk to you here about Accrington. But of course, the big news is another club that you spent some time with, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, which is Macclesfield, which they received winding up orders due to some debt today. So before we get on to talking about Accrington, I'm sure that you had some opinions on that you probably wanted to start off with.
Yeah, of course. I mean, absolutely gutted to hear the news coming from the court today. Macclesfield Town is such a fantastic club, very similar to Accrington in terms of size and the town and the sport. And very much, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's really true with both the clubs, Accrington and Macclesfield. It's a real family club, and it's kind of really ripping that out of the heart of that community to see the club is no more after this morning's hearing. I think particularly it's a shame that it's almost a case again of one man that's held them to ransom and hasn't done what he should have done. And there's certainly been, I think, a lot of lies and deceit has kind of compounded what's gone on there. And it's a shame because it was 3-4 years ago, something like that. We'd been in the FA Trophy final. We'd just been promoted back to the Football League when I left. And it was in a good position. So to see it decline so quickly is really, really sad.
It's really just devastating anytime we see this happen with a club because, anybody who supports a small club, whether it be Accrington Stanley or, Rochdale, for instance, you just look at Macclesfield or Barry and you say, you know what, this could be my club one day. And of course, with Accrington Stanley back in the 60s, that was what happened with Accrington. And it's just because the club is so much a part of the community, especially when it's a small family club like you mentioned, it really, it's something where the community really suffers. It's not just about football.
It is. And I'd say to the community now, this is the time that your football club needs you. I think although today's news is hard and there'll be a lot of tears and a lot of upset, sadly, I think it's the only way that they were ever going to get shut of the big problem, which was the owner at Macclesfield. I certainly had a few issues with him in my time when I was there, and it just showed himself to not really be a very honest and open person in terms of the problems that they've had more recently. So I think although the football club's gone, the sad thing is it happened so late in the day that now they're going to have a season similar to Bury. They're going to have a season without any football. But it gives them 12 months to get together, put something together. Even if it means starting again, you start down at the North West Counties League. I just hope that they can pull together, enjoy the journey and fight their way back up.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, I know we've it happened to Accrington and it does leave a bit of a footballing wasteland. Do you think there'll be many more of these clubs? Because, I mean, obviously we've had Bury, we've got Macclesfield. We know loads of teams are in trouble due to this COVID virus. Do you think there'll be others?
I think COVID is. I think the sad thing with Macclesfield is, I'm sure there'll be some people who try to point to the COVID situation and other things. The EFL user takes quite a bit of stick around this, but with Macclesfield, it was all down to one man really. As I say, I know firsthand. I saw that the club there was money coming into the club and going out very quickly. When we had FA Cup runs and things like that, to the extent that because money was being taken out, we were struggling to pay wages and we had to do a lot of juggling around. So having seen... Yeah,
it's been a long time coming then.
Yes, having had an insight into the way that things were run, it's although I'm sure that COVID and things like that have been a kind of a factor, it was going to happen sooner or later because of the way the club was run and because of what was at the club's core.
Yeah, okay. So jumping on to Accrington. So normally we write a script and then we have a little section around supporters' questions, but tonight, I think we'll be running with almost all supporters' questions because there's been that many, so which is good. Obviously, a lot of friends. You were there. You've been there a long time.
I haven't got a football career to talk about, is what you mean.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but you've plenty to talk about. Obviously, you were at Accrington a long time. We've got some of your friends who've made comments, and we'll start off with a question from me. I know you've been a lifelong Stanley fan. How and when did you first come about getting involved with Accrington from a job-wise, Rob?
Yeah, it's just stemmed back from generally being a supporter of the club. I was lucky. My dad and my granddad took me on to Accrington when I was at primary school. So I'd been going on for a good number of years. And we talk about supporter engagement these days. I kind of look back to a couple of things that happened when I was a very young Stanley fan. I remember I wrote a letter into the club asking for a signed programme. And I think I was probably one of the only people, certainly in primary school. I know when I went to secondary school, there was myself and Rob Russell, who's obviously also well known. I think it was just us two at St Christopher's School, in the whole school that supported Accrington Stanley, our hometown team. But I remember being at primary school, I wrote this letter and I got a letter back from John Alty, who was chairman at the time. And it was only a few lines, but it was on Stanley letter-headed paper. And it just said it's great to have such a young fan of the club who's supporting us. And he sent me a signed programme, and it was signed by the players, a little note from the manager at the time. And I just remember at primary school, at 11 years old, that meant so much to me. And I took it into school, and I was brought up to the front in assembly. And then the headmaster showed it to the whole school. And it was such pride in that. And that's just a great example of supporter engagement, which gets talked about a lot these days, but it only ever seems to be done when there's a photographer and somebody can put something on social media about it. And it's just one of those things that it just shows when you get it right, it can either be great for the young person involved, or it can condemn them to a life of supporting Accrington Stanley, as it did in my case.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, sorry, yeah. Obviously, my dad and my granddad used to take me on. And kind of, it's like a rite of you move through rites of passage as you support a football club, don't you? You're taken on by your relatives, and then you get a little bit older and you start to go with your own friends. A little bit older again, and it's not just about watching the football. You're having a few drinks as well, and it continues. It continues. So you get a little bit older, and then you're taking your own kids on, and it's been great to see so many people who I've supported Accrington Stanley with. Who have come through as youngsters, and now they're taking their own children on to the club, who will go on to take their grandchildren on and such like, and that's how football works, isn't it? In terms, sorry, I'm just rambling on, aren't I? In terms of how
so it comes across well. You got a passion for the club, and you were a supporter at a young age. It's good to hear.
The only problem is you get to an age where you ramble on and you forget the actual question, don't you? So anyway, how I came to work at the club. Yes, there was. I was a computer programmer at the time, which was great. But it was a very big company, and I was a very small cog in a large wheel. And I was very frustrated at what I was doing. I've always been a big fan of that quote that if you find a job that you love, you'll never do a day's work in your life. And as a young person, I always wanted to do something where I could make a difference in what I did. So I had a little bit of an involvement with the club in running an unofficial website, coolandgroovy.co.uk, back in the day. I've no idea why it was called coolandgroovy.co.uk. It was a completely random name, but it captured
Only
the imagination.
If we can retrieve that, Rob. Can that be found anywhere?
There are little snapshots of it on the Internet History database, yeah.
We must find it.
I think I've got it stored on my computer somewhere as well. But it had brought me to the attention of the powers that be, and I'd been dragged in front of John Coleman once or twice by Eric Wally. Had pulled me to one side and said, "John, what's the word we have to give?" And I had to go and justify one of the two things that I'd written. So I knew Eric and most of the people at the club. And a young lady called Liz Rackstraw was doing a lot of admin work at the club. That was her job. She left to do cabin crew. So I knew there was an opportunity there. So I kind of went to Eric and asked him if I could help out in one form or another, which I did. He took me along. It's kind of I was thinking of it being a year out at first from what I was doing from computer programming. with the intention of having to go back into the real world at some point. But in the first year that I worked there, the club actually won promotion to the conference in that year, which obviously made it worth kind of sticking around. It was a bit more interesting. The second year we had the really good FA Cup run, where Andy Gout scored his cracker against Huddersfield live on BBC. And then we played Bournemouth and Colchester, and that brought in a good sum of money for Accrington at that time, certainly. And that was what gave us the kind of confidence to have a stab at going full-time then. Up to that point, we were just a part-time club, training 2 evenings a week and playing on a Saturday afternoon. So the club went on, became full-time. A couple of years later, had made it back into the Football League. That was the big promotion, of course. Turnover had gone from around £100,000 a year to over £1 million, and players had gone from, I think, a couple of people to over 50 with the academy and all the full-time players. So the club had developed very quickly in a short period of time, and I got kind of caught up in it and stuck with it, really. Yeah,
almost too quickly, I'd say, Rob, in a way. I mean, you can't always dictate what happens on the pitch, but in some ways, did it happen? Well, in my opinion, it seemed to happen a little bit too quick, looking back now in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because when you get blessed with a bit of success, you'd certainly never turn it down and
no, definitely
stay where you are. So, but yeah, it made it very difficult to then kind of balance. Certainly, I mean, the facilities at the football club, which have come on in leaps and bounds recently, we were very much a kind of. It was strange, wasn't it? Because for as long as I could remember as being a youngster, and you'll know this, we were always the big club in the kind of Unibond League and the North West Counties leagues. Everyone looked forward to coming to Accrington because it was one of the best pitches and the greatest facilities. And then all of a sudden, you're in the Football League and you're a very small boy all of a sudden, and your facilities probably aren't the best. That's certainly for the away fans that stood out on the open terrace and peeing in porter cabins and such like. So it's good to see that we're certainly moving on from there. And
yeah, I mean, definitely. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, and Tony Robinson has been asking about highs and lows of your time at the club, and we've focused on the promotion so much over the last few months and a couple of years now, and we've never really got into the tough times. I don't think we've never had anyone on who was around when we were in debt and going to court and, in the same kind of, situation Macclesfield find themselves in, obviously for different reasons. But that must have been really tough around that time, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for that, Darren. So we'll get Rob Hayes in to talk about the tough times.
Yeah, it's your turn now. So you can come on and talk about all the negative stuff. No, it's all part of history though, isn't it, Rob?
Oh, massively. It's highs and lows, isn't it, football? And I always say to people, the highs tend to only be 1 or 2% in football. It's that last minute winner or that cup win. They are few and far between. So it's usually 98% turmoil and hard work and suffering. But that 1 or 2% just makes it all worthwhile in football. But you're right. There were some very, very tough times, particularly with the winding up orders that Accrington faced going back. Probably 2009-10, I think, was the winding up order, and it was a culmination of things. It was the season before 2008-9 had caused us some real problems when Fraser Eagle went bust, and that was a big sponsorship deal for Accrington, one of the biggest ones we'd ever had. It was worth over £100,000 to us. So a kind of a football club with a turnover of £1 million, 100,000 is a huge amount. Well, 100,000 plus is a huge amount of revenue to lose. So we didn't get any of that at all that season. And the difficult thing with football is you're always trying to play a balancing game, because you don't want to end up relegated at the end of the season and have a surplus of £200,000, because you would kind of point to that and think perhaps we should have spent some of that money in staying up if we'd spent some of that money. But similarly, obviously, you don't want to even get promoted and have a deficit of £200,000. So you always aim to have a little bit of kind of room for error, but you're almost trying to balance the books and finish on a zero. But obviously, Fraser Eagle went bust, so we lost 100,000 there. And same season, 2008-9, I think we had a terrible winter. I think we had something like 2 games over a course of 2 months in the winter. We lost all the big Christmas fixtures, the New Year's Day fixture where all your money comes in. So all of a sudden, you've probably lost another 60, 70, 80,000 there from lost revenue in matches, which of course you do play the matches again, but they're on a Tuesday night in February and you're not making the same money that you would have done over the Christmas period. So that's when the plates start to wobble then, if you will, and you're spinning plates and trying to keep things going. But it's just similar to kind of consumer problems really with debt. Once you start having to juggle finances, it can become quickly a downward spiral. And then that's the problem with Accrington. Everything seemed to, it's not a case of woe is me, but a lot of things conspired against us that season and ultimately led to the problems that we had in 2009.
I mean, it must have been difficult with it actually going to court and the legalities of it all. It must have been something you're not really prepared for as you don't go into football expecting to end up in those kind of situations, Rob, I'm sure. No,
not at all. And I think right from the start we said it was, I mean, it was a winding up order for around £300,000, which sounds almost small, doesn't it, compared to a lot of the money that's talked in football. But it was a lot of money for Accrington Stanley at that point. But we had expressed our intention straight away. We always wanted to pay that money. It was never a case of looking to go into some kind of voluntary creditors voluntary agreement, which an awful lot of football clubs did back in the day, and ended up paying a penny in the pound to, whether that's just the tax man or often that involved a lot of local businesses as well. That as a football club, you're always looking to work with local businesses. So the last thing you want to be doing is not paying money that you owe. So obviously it was a case of going to the High Court. Very, very tough times, very, very worrying times. And it was a battle. And obviously there was a lot of politics going on behind the scenes as well at that time. And I think it was kind of good to have been involved and be part of the solution. Because I think I was kind of, a lot of the times I felt like I was kind of stuck in the middle trying to keep things going and trying to keep all parties talking. And obviously, fortunately for Accrington, things worked out and the club was able to continue.
Yeah, definitely. So things moved on and obviously got through that period and went on from strength to strength, really. So, and like I said, it's all part of history. And if that hadn't have happened, we wouldn't be where we are today. So on a little bit light-hearted note, we'll go on to a couple of little questions from your friends, fellow supporters. I've got one from Steve Law. Everyone knows Lowe. He's been on the podcast before.
Lowe's lucky boss.
Lowe's lucky boss. And he's asking about your best memory of playing for the Ultras.
The Ultras was fantastic. That was all down to Stephen Law, really. He kind of put that together. I think that one of the fantastic things about football is that it doesn't matter what level you can play at or have an involvement at. I mean, we can't all be David Beckham scoring goals for England or but winning Champions Leagues and things like that. But the thing with football, you've got two jumpers on a football. You can play football even if it's just having a kick around with the kids in the park. So I think for us, the Ultras, you were wearing a Stanley shirt. It was a Stanley badge. It was your town team's badge. And we had a great few seasons kind of travelling around the Northwest. It added an extra element because we were playing other football clubs, so there's some good rivalry matches with the likes of Southport and Barrow, being able to actually go out and play against teams like that. But it was just the whole camaraderie of it as well. It was a real eclectic mix of different people from different backgrounds, but we all kind of came together on a Sunday afternoon to play for the Stanley Ultras, and had a lot of success as well, to be fair, which was
Lowe likes telling people about that, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't think I had a big impact on that from right back, but I was there. That's all that matters. I was there, and we had a lot of fun, and made a lot of friends, I think, around the Northwest.
Definitely. So, next question from Alex Crook. He's another guy who listens to this podcast regularly. And he's asking a question about, this is one that doesn't mean anything to me, but arriving at Morecambe at half time for a game. Does that ring any bells, Rob?
Yeah, it does. I think it was a bit of a nightmare that day. I was always last minute. I always used to pride myself of arriving kind of 5 minutes before kick-off. I was never a big fan of the kind of pre-match eating food and pretending to be nice to your opponents when all you want to do is get on the pitch and take the points off them. But that's not to say, I mean, after the game, it was different. I'd always try and have a drink with the opposition counterparts after the game, and win, lose, or draw, because you can learn an awful lot from other clubs and other people in football. But before the game, I was always just keen to watch the match and suffered a little bit from pre-match nerves, perhaps, as I'm sure we all do as football supporters. But Morecambe was a bit of a disaster. There was all kinds of traffic, and even with an erratic driving style, there was no way I was going to get there for kick-off. But there was one of the half-time arrivals. I think I seem to remember that I think I'd missed a couple of sendings off, and I'd missed all the action. And I don't think there were any goals in the second half either. So learned a lesson that day.
Darren, do you think now is a good time for that one part of the show?
Yes, definitely.
Now, Rob, since you listened to the show, I know that you're already familiar with Tony Robinson's now famous rapid fire.
I don't like this bit. The number of times I've been driving along and you play that sound effect, and I've nearly crashed the car about 3 or 4 times. I'm on edge now because you're going to play it again, aren't you?
well, we add that sound effect afterwards.
That's all right, so I can relax then.
So we just say pause and put sound effect here. And we add that in afterwards. That's a little behind the scenes insider information. Breaking news.
Technology here up.
But I think that Tony's first question was mushy or garden peas. Which do you prefer?
I don't mind the taste of either, but it has to be mushy peas. I think garden peas are such difficult vegetables to eat. They end up going everywhere unless you've got mashed potato or something like that. Stick them together. So it's got to be mushy peas.
There you go. You got the mashed potatoes, the peas. That's good stuff there. Red sauce or brown sauce on your bacon buddy sandwich?
It'd be red, but it'd be homemade ketchup, because I think my daughter Charlotte absolutely loves red sauce. But she'd literally eat bowls and bowls of it if you let her. So I've had to start making my own red sauce now from tomatoes. And to be fair, I think it tastes a lot better, and it's a lot healthier as well. There's none of the sugar and the salt. So it'd be red sauce, and it'd be homemade red sauce.
Yeah, that's a good distinction that we maybe need to make for our American listeners, is that red sauce is the same thing as what we call ketchup over here. And the closest thing that we have to brown sauce over here would be, my understanding, is like A1 steak sauce. So when we say brown sauce or red sauce for our American listeners, that's ketchup or A1 sauce. The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Well, I live on the Wirral, and obviously there's huge connections with Liverpool for Accrington Stanley, so I'd have to say Beatles for that.
Yeah, I think that you can't really go wrong either way, but the Beatles, I think they just stand above anybody. All right, do you prefer Coronation Street or EastEnders?
No, I'll just say no to that. I'm not answering that question.
There we go. All right, well, on Netflix, would you rather watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan or Sunderland Till I Die?
I haven't watched The Last Dance yet, but it's on my list of things to watch. I have watched Sunderland Till I Die. I kind of take that with a little pinch of salt, because it's obviously it's done as entertainment, isn't it, as a programme, and it's sometimes these football programmes don't always show football clubs in a good light, as I have experienced with Accrington Stanley exactly, which is a film for a series of programmes from the deep dark past as well. Although, having said that, it's still available on YouTube, and even though it was, you do grimace a little bit when you watch it back. It's a good record of how the club was in a period of time. It's almost a snapshot of Accrington Stanley history at that time.
Have you watched that yet, Phil? The documentary on YouTube of Accrington Stanley?
I've seen parts of it. I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing through, but I've seen clips that people have posted.
Yeah. Well, you'll be able to go back and look at Robin in action now.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get on to the next question, which is: do you prefer black pudding with your full English breakfast?
Oh, definitely. As a proud Lancastrian, you can't have a full English without black pudding.
All right, and then the newer music question that we ask is Oasis or Blur. Which one of those would you rather listen to?
Definitely Oasis. Definitely Oasis.
Oasis. All right, I have to agree with that one too. It does seem like the better bands come from Northern England. I'll probably get some letters on that one. All right, and then the last one from Rapid Fire is my question. In Phoenix, Arizona here, we put hot jalapeno peppers on our pepperoni pizza. Would you like to try a pizza with hot jalapeno peppers on it?
Definitely, loads and loads. There's no such thing as something that's too hot. More the better.
That is what I'm talking about right there. Extra jalapenos.
Stack them up. Yeah, definitely.
And wash it down with a pint of Aki ale.
Yeah, let's do that as well.
Darren, did you have any other rapid fires that I missed?
Yeah, just one that came to mind. Who is most likely to buy you a pint, John Coleman or Jimmy Bell?
I'm not sure if either of them ever have, to be fair. So maybe we can turn it back on them, and I'll email you back and I'll answer you which one ever did buy me the first pint, if any of them ever do.
If ever, yeah. Okay, good stuff. Just going back to a couple of questions from people. Well, we'll drag the tone down a little bit more now. Rob, just going on to a question from me again. We want to touch on because we've only got one opportunity, so I'll ask all the difficult questions. The betting charges, how did that all come about? How did it actually evolve? Because do you think you were hard done to? I know we've had Cav on, and he thought he was very hard done to around that period. So what about yourself?
Yeah, keeping it light up with this one, Darren.
Yeah, no. I've got one opportunity. I'm going for it.
No,
I always say we're not a hard hitting show, man, but Darren wrote some hard hitting questions today. Welcome to 2020. That's an American show that I know won't translate over there.
No, I'm very happy to talk about it. Yeah, I'm very disappointed with the kind of severity of the sentence that was passed down, if you call it a sentence. At the time, I wasn't kind of knowingly breaking the rules by betting on football. I think the rules were a little bit complicated. I actually got caught out because of a tweet that I put out about a bet that I put on the semi-finals of the League Cup or something like that. Somebody at the FA spotted that. And I got a letter asking to go in and have a chat with them, which I did. And then, I mean, I'd never been in trouble in my life. I didn't even have a detention at school. I never did lines. So to kind of be in this situation where you're accused of something, I just always believed that kind of honesty was the best policy. So I handed over. I could have lied about betting accounts and things like that, but I handed over the details of everything I had, and they got onto betting companies and pulled off lists going back 15 years of kind of betting history. And some of those did break the rules in terms of you can't bet on competitions that you're involved in. The one or two, I think the big thing that did stand out that I was always keen to kind of comment on was that there were some bets against Accrington Stanley winning, but every single one of them was an accumulator that was kind of a group of 4 or 5 results that I didn't want to happen. Sorry, betting against Accrington to win, yeah. So there were kind of results, Accrington to lose, Barrow to win, because we didn't particularly like Barrow, and just a number of teams and rivals. So if all of those came in, and you're talking £2 accumulators, it was no serious money.
Yeah.
But obviously the headline there was the chief exec betting against his own team, and it obviously there's kind of undertones of match fixing and things like that, which obviously wasn't the case, but. Yeah, it all came out. I had my FA here, and I had a day out at Wembley, which was lovely in one of their executive suites, which was lovely tea and coffee. And I was
the only time Stanley have been to Wembley, I think, isn't it?
Let's not make a big thing of that, Darren. Yeah.
Sorry, Rob.
I'll tell you what impressed me in there was when you said that you never even got suspended in school. Man, I got suspended in high school all the time. I think my senior year, I set the record for the most times getting caught smoking in the bathroom.
I've always tried to play by the rules wherever possible, which is why I tried to be so open and honest when I got caught out. But yeah, it almost 2 years banned from football when other people at the same time who got done with similar offences seemed to get off a bit lighter because they were kind of Premier League and a higher level.
And I was going to come on to that.
Yeah, 2 years being banned from football for 2 years in a job that you've worked in for the best part of 10 years. All of a sudden, not only was I fined a 4-figure sum, but they effectively took my job off me as well. And it was quite a difficult.
I mean, if you'd have been at a Premier League club, you'd have had lawyers working for you. And, when you see some of the things that go on higher up compared to, what you were being accused of, it just didn't sit right. I'm not saying, it was perfect what you did, but there's something that just didn't seem right with it all to me.
Oh, God. But ultimately, also at the end of the day, I accept that the rules were there and I brought them, and you have to accept the consequences. So it kind of was what it was. I accepted it and moved on. So, yeah, it's something to talk about on shows like this.
Yeah, it's good podcast information, isn't it? Obviously, you left Accrington a couple of years later, and then your next stop was Macclesfield, straight back into football. We've already talked about the current polite situation we're in. Macclesfield find themselves in. But a question from Gary Demain and Daniel Bowerbank, who's at Accrington now, they both asked the same question really about the comparison of working at Macclesfield and Stanley. I know you alluded to the fact that they're both similar sized clubs. Was it same in terms of day-to-day stuff?
It really was. It definitely, there's so many similarities, which almost made taking the Macclesfield job easier and working there easier. Just in terms of a club that relies heavily on volunteers to get things done. Similar sized town, similar kind of people who just want the football club to do well, people who are very proud of the football club. A lot of local businesses that weren't not huge local businesses, but were always happy to do their bit and get involved with the club. And similar on the pitch as well. I think when Accrington won, both Accrington and Macclesfield won the leagues, there was a good mix of players, and there was some flair players and some good players who went on and went on to do well in football with other clubs. But it just seemed to be a lot about the team spirit. I think with both John Coleman at Accrington and John Askey at Macclesfield, they did really well in terms of harbouring this team spirit and this never say die attitude that players had. The way that they looked after their players, they'd kind of run through brick walls from them and achieve the results that they wanted. I don't like to play on that too much because I think that's taken a little bit away from the kind of the tactical knowledge and the tactical expertise. And John and Jimmy and John Askey, who I work with at Macclesfield, they are very, very good tactically. You can't keep going season after season having good seasons with that's staying up or keep getting promoted just by having good team spirit. But I do think that's one thing that they're certainly both very good at.
Now, after you moved on to Macclesfield, you went into another club. I think it's one of those things where it really illustrates what a difficult world the EFL is sometimes, where there's just the fact of the matter is there's a lot of poorly run clubs out there, and you moved on to Blackpool, where you ended up working for somebody who's a bit infamous, if you will, in Owen Oyston and the Oyston family. What was it like having to go into that situation where I know there was fans that were protesting and not coming to the games, and certainly very serious charges from the past and even convictions against Oyston, and it just had to be a difficult environment to walk into. Not to bring things down again, but what was that like? Let's
talk about Blackpool. No, the Blackpool was absolutely bonkers, absolutely crazy. I'd left Macclesfield Town just because of again politics. It wasn't. You could almost see what was going to come, and it was always a battle with some of the people involved. So it was the right time to leave Macclesfield. So I was kind of at a loose end. And it's actually Gary Lewis, the groundsman I'd worked with him at Accrington. I then took him to Macclesfield when I was at Macclesfield, and he'd actually moved on and gone to Blackpool. And he knew I was out of work, so I think he had a word with somebody and just said, have a chat with my mate Rob. So I kind of went up and ended up in a job at Blackpool. But it was the kind of the craziest place. I didn't really report to anybody. I just kind of turned up and plodded on a little bit and didn't really have any kind of line management or report to anyone in particular. It was strange, but there was a really good bunch of people behind the scenes there that were just keeping that club going despite everything it was going through. There was almost a kind of gallows humour to it because it was just for them, and a lot of them had been there a lot longer than I'd been there. And it was just a case of, I think they all knew that something would happen at some point, but it was just a case of keeping it going. And of course, ultimately, it did. Again, court action. There's a lot about courts and things, isn't there, in this podcast? The court action.
It's trouble, Rob. It follows you around, doesn't it? You're a glutton for punishment, getting involved with football.
You start to think that, don't you, after a little bit? Especially when you start talking about it, you start to think things through, yeah. But no, the court appointed receiver because Mr. Oyston, I had so little contact with Mr. Oyston. I hardly ever saw him at all. It was his daughter Natalie who I initially spoke to. But the club was taken from him, and it was ordered that it would be sold in order to pay off a debt that he owed to somebody else. But to be honest, that was a really exciting point. When the court-appointed receiver came in, he brought in some fantastic people to look after the running of the club with a view to selling it to the current owner, who's got the club now. But he did a couple of guys, Ben Hatton, Michael Bolingbroke, both hugely experienced in the world of sport. Both had worked at Manchester United at that very senior level, amongst other clubs. And the way they came, it was a real learning curve how they came in. There were no attitudes that came in at all. They were very keen to learn how people worked. They wanted people to carry on almost doing what they were doing. They almost wanted to learn from the people that were working at the club. And they gave people the power to make their own decisions and back them up. And it was a real kind of lesson in how to manage a situation. And it was, unfortunately, they ended up leaving when the club was sold. But it was the few months that I was able to work with them was amazing. And it just been involved when the fans came back, the first homecoming game, and seeing the way that people reacted to having the football club back after such a long time of not being able to watch Blackpool and not being able to watch football on a Saturday afternoon, things that a lot of people take for granted. And they've been through a lot of pain and suffering. I think one of the things that really touched me with that kind of comeback game was the stories of people who'd gone to Blackpool and watched football matches with somebody special, who during the time that they'd been boycotting, that person was no longer with us because they passed away. Mm. And so they were going back to club. And there were a number of people who bought an extra ticket and the seat just sat empty with a scarf on it. And that was for the person that they used to watch the football with, who was obviously no longer there. And in a stadium when it's packed and there's one or two empty seats with a scarf over that, that's a real poignant message of what it meant to the people of Blackpool to get back supporting their team. Yeah,
it obviously means everything to people, yeah. Obviously now, well, not obviously, but you're not involved with football now, Rob, so just tell us what you're doing now. You've gone into a different line of work.
Yes, and so far there haven't been any court appearances or financial issues, which is good. I can see the current boss suddenly starting to get a little bit nervous. And might have to have a conversation in the next few days. I've gone into an engineering company in Blackburn who I did have an involvement in years and years ago when I first left college. I'd left Blackpool. And John Norris, who's been involved at Accrington in various guises as well, he's been a director and he does some good sponsorship and helps out there. He offered me a job working for him. B&M Longworth, the company's called, over in Blackburn. Day to day, we kind of clean industrial components, but we also make machines that do what we do, and we sell them literally all over the world from here in Blackburn, Lancashire. But what was most exciting of all, what really helped me, was they do a lot of research and development work into kind of recycling and circular economy and things like that, just generally cleaning up the world. So we're working with some big hitters on things like carbon fibre reclamation and some very even top secret stuff that we can't even talk about, which just makes it sound even more exciting. So it's very different from working in football, but it's really good stuff, and it goes back to that making a difference. I don't want to just go back to being a number, being the computer programmer in the large corporation. I think what we do in Blackburn, what B&M Longworth does, it's really exciting and could be a way forward for a lot of the problems that we've got in the world today.
Right, and just in case your boss is or isn't listening, would you return to football if the opportunity came along, Rob, or are you happy doing what you're doing now?
I don't know. You never say never, do you?
No, you don't.
Even though I've joked that I'm getting on a little bit, I'd like to think I've got a few years work. In fact, with the way the kind of pension age is going, I think I've got another 40, 50, 60 years to go yet before I can retire.
Yeah, I've got to work forever now, haven't we?
But if Barcelona called, then you'd listen.
Yeah, we don't maybe have a conversation just because of the weather, but that's a way off. Yeah, I think we've definitely got. I've always enjoyed, like I say, making a difference, and I think wherever the football clubs I've been to, I've always, despite the ups and downs, I've always left them in a kind of a stronger position, a better position in terms of league and finances than when I joined, and I'd like to think that there's a good few years of doing good things here at Longworth before I look at anything else.
Oh, excellent. So just one last question from two people, and it's probably one you get asked quite a bit. When are we going to see you back on Stanley, on the Clayton end? People, are keen to see you back at the ground, Rob, as a supporter. I know it was difficult when you left the club, and I spoke to you, offline about that, but are you likely to be coming and watching a game soon?
No, I was disappointed to leave Accrington, kind of the manner it happened. But I think that's a story for my book when I eventually write it.
Yeah.
But I'm a great believer in moving on quickly, and I think if you start holding grudges, it only eats you up. It doesn't affect anyone else. So I moved on very quickly for that. And to be honest, if I hadn't left Accrington, I wouldn't. I went to Wembley with Macclesfield in the FA Trophy, which is to tick on the bucket list for anyone involved in football, is to take a team to Wembley. So then got them promoted.
Don't rub it in because you've been and I haven't.
It's only a matter of time, Darren. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But
if I hadn't underdone that, we wouldn't have got Macclesfield promoted from the National League out of the conference, or whatever you call it these days. And I wouldn't have had the good time at Blackpool. I've met some brilliant friends in football who I keep in touch with. So I wouldn't have had any of that. I had my time at Accrington. I really enjoyed it. It seemed to cost a lot of time and money and effort and pain, but I loved every second at Accrington. And you just kind of move on, and the club will be around for hundreds of years. Hopefully, you do your little bit and then you pass it on, and now it's somebody else's turn to kind of love it and do their bit. But in terms of supporting the club, I'll always support the club. And unfortunately, COVID's kind of done its thing and thrown a spanner in the works at the moment. But I'd like to think it won't be too long before, certainly before Lottie and I are back supporting. Whether that's on the Clayton Terrace or whether it's in one of the stands, we'll certainly be at the WAM Stadium soon.
I love what you said about the 100 years, because of course, as we all know, Darren wrote the 50-year history of Accrington Stanley book, and one thing I always say to Darren is with these podcasts and chronicling the history, that my hope is whoever's writing the 100 years of Accrington Stanley book will be able to look back on these and say, okay, this part of the history here. And that's exactly what you said. It's just about, the club will hopefully be around forever, and while we're around, to be able to make whatever impact we can to make for the betterment of the history and make the club better for those of the future.
Oh, definitely. I think what you're doing here is kind of making a record, and I would imagine podcasts will be accessible for years and years to come. So it's kind of a resource that people can get back to. And I've really enjoyed listening to Across the Pitch. I was a bit late coming to the party, really. I only started listening at the start of this year, really, when lockdown hit. And I was kind of driving around. We've still been working, so I was kind of listening to the podcast as I was driving into work, and it almost kind of reignited my passion for the club. Listening back to some of the old stories, certainly from some of the lads from 10, 20 years ago when I was at the football club, and just laughing out loud at some of the stories. Again, of Lutel talking about Rory Prendergast and all the things that were coming out. And it's good. It's a fantastic resource, and I think you're doing a really good job that'll be around for many years to come. The 100 years book, that I'm sure it'll be Darren writing that one again. He's always writing one book or another, isn't it? But he doesn't have to talk about it, does he?
No, not at all. I think it might be my grandchild who's doing the 100.
Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and we definitely want to do it again in the future. And we definitely appreciate you being a good sport with all of Darren's hard-hitting questions.
No, joking aside, Rob, I mean, I did prime you before, and I said, are we okay to talk about anything, from the past? And you were more than up for it, which is brilliant. And I quite honestly say this: I've never ever heard of anyone have a bad word about you. So I can honestly say that when you do come back watching Stanley, everyone will be thrilled. Joking aside, so
thank you, Darren.
For coming on.
That's pleasure.
We really appreciate it, and we like to always finish off the show, if we can, with an on Stanley on. So on Stanley on.
On Stanley on.
On Stanley on.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.